So for this video, I'm going to be ranking every single Dead by Daylight killer on how strong I think they are. Yes, all 5 of them now? Jesus. That's just be my personal opinion. I'm not stating this as absolute fact, and you don't have to agree with me. If you want to, get a conversation going, go into the comments. Maybe we can have a chat. Are we going from weakest to strongest? Just, build up the tension, I guess. I don't know. But, yeah, without further ado, let's just get into it. D tier. Now, these killers need major buffs or just complete reworks to their kits, because at the moment they're just not worth using. And as much as it pains me to say this, we're going to be starting off with the Trapper. Now, what's Trapper's power? He sets down bear traps. Very creative name, I know. But overall, he's just not very good. Like, there was a day where I thought he's kind of half decent, but the more I play him, the more bad I realise he is. He doesn't have any mobility. He has to actually go round the map to put down his traps, which especially sucks because he doesn't have the mobility to go to the traps. He's pretty map dependent because you have to rely on grass and such for him to actually trick survivors. He has got some good add-ons, I'll give him that, but he is fairly add-on dependent as well. Overall, Trapper is just such a disappointing killer to put down here, but hey, maybe they'll give him some more buffs and he'll still be D tier. I will say one good thing about him though, if you manage to hook someone at endgame in basement, you've got a kill, pretty much. That's the only good thing Trapper's for, is basement camping, especially if it's a shack. Yeah, that's just the only thing he's good for. Right, next up we have the Nightmare Freddy Krueger. Now, I'll give him this, he does have some pretty decent mobility. Freddy is able to teleport to generators, but it's stuck on a long cooldown. Now, if you want to go somewhere, like 9 times out of 10, you're going to want to go to generators because that's the main objective. But outside of that, he is not very good. You have to hit survivors to put them in the dream world for them to be affected by your power, which are these dream snares, which just slightly slow survivors down for a bit. That's it. He does have an add-on where you can replace these snares with fake pallets, which just makes them even worse. But, yeah, overall, he is not majorly map dependent, I would say. He's just like, if it's a bad killer map, then he's going to be bad on that. He does have the worst add-ons I've ever seen on a killer as well. It's like, you can hear survivors louder. Like, his very rare add-ons are just, you can hear survivors louder when they're in the dream world. It's not very good. Freddy does also have a little bit of stealth. When survivors are in the dream world, they are afflicted with the Oblivious status effect, but they can hear, like, the lullaby from the film still, so, it's not amazing, but it's something. I'll give him that. Right, next up we have the C tier. These killers need a couple of buffs here and there to make them more viable than they already are. However, they do tend to be outclassed by other killers. To start off C tier, we have the Pig, who can crouch to become undetectable at the cost of some speed. However, in this crouched state, she can perform an ambush attack, which allows her to dash forward and hit any survivors in her way. This ambush attack can be used pretty effectively, however there are just better chase powers out there to use. Her main power are the reverse bear traps she can put on the heads of downed survivors. These survivors then have to go around the map looking for jigsaw boxes in order to get the traps off their heads. If they do not get them off before the time runs out, they die. So it's a pretty good incentive to not do the generators. However, you can only have up to 5 traps with the use of an add-on, making this slowdown very limited. The Pig is also the most luck-dependent killer, because the survivors can either get the bear trap off in the first jigsaw box or the third, and these jigsaw boxes can be spread out around the map really well, or they're really close to each other. She also doesn't do well in very pallet-heavy maps. And outside of a couple of her rarer add-ons, she doesn't have anything that's really worth running. So overall, the Pig is just not a great killer. Next up we have the Shape, Michael Myers. Now, Myers has to stalk survivors in order to upgrade his power. He starts at tier 1, where he doesn't have a terror radius and can't lunge and is slow. He then has to stalk up to tier 2, where he gets a slightly smaller terror radius than the usual killer, then he can lunge. And at tier 3, he is able to insta-down every survivor. Now, he's not very good because he has a very slow start to the game, and quite frankly, in Dead by Daylight, you have to have a good start in order to do well. However, Myers has very, very good add-ons. With his Tombstone add-ons, he's able to instantly kill any survivor whilst he's in tier 3. Like, he just has to walk up to them and then you can just stab them. He also has an add-on that gives him tier 3 for the entire game, so you're able to insta-down survivors for the whole game, which is very handy, but he needs these add-ons in order to do well. Without these add-ons, he is completely useless. I would put him in D tier, but because of these insta-kill add-ons, that kind of puts him into B tier, so C tier is a good compromise. Next up we have the Clown, who can throw down 2 different types of bottles. One slows survivors down, giving him a good chase power, and the other slightly speeds him up, which gives him pretty okay mobility. It's not an amazing speed boost, but, you know, a speed boost is a speed boost. He doesn't do very well on larger maps because you can't really keep up with what's going on. However, on smaller maps, he is a pretty formidable foe. Overall, he does have some pretty decent add-ons, like being able to carry some extra bottles or slowing survivors down even further. You will want to use 1 or 2 of these add-ons to make him actually feel like you can keep up with the match, though. Next update, you will be getting a couple of extra bottles space kit, but I don't think that's going to make him any much stronger than he already is. Right, up next we have Ghostface, who has a very good stealth power. He's able to go undetectable at will. Whilst he is in his stealth, he is able to stalk survivors and then instantly down them once he fully stalks them. This can allow you to nearly fully stalk a survivor whenever you want, and then fully stalk them at the right moment to maybe catch them off guard before they get to a very good position. Now, if a survivor looks at you for too long whilst you're in your stealth mode, you will lose it. However, they will be marked with Killer Instinct, so it does give you pretty decent info on where survivors can be. However, he doesn't have any mobility, and he is rather map dependent, judging that it has to be a good map to be able to hide around places. If it's like a large open map, you're not going to be able to sneak up on anyone. He is rather add-on dependent as well. He just needs maybe like a brown add-on to like help his stalking speed up a bit, or, you know, little bits here and there to make him a little bit better. But he does have some pretty good, strong add-ons as well to use with him. But yeah, overall, I'd say Ghostface is a pretty solid killer. It's just, if he had like a couple tweaks here and there, he'd be a lot stronger and a lot more viable. Next we have Legion, who has very good slowdown. Their power allows them to run quicker and then slash at survivors, injuring them and giving them the deep wound status effect, which means they have to mend. And if you're able to get 4 hits whilst in your power, you are able to then down the next survivor you hit. So Legion is very good at being able to spread pressure across all survivors. However, if it's a good team, they will tend to stay injured, so your power will be less effective against them. You'll still be able to put them in the deep wound, but it won't be as impactful and you won't get as much slowdown by them just constantly healing. You don't also have a lot of mobility. You can use your Feral Frenzy to get across the map because you do have slightly increased movement speed, but it's not that great. And your power can't really be used in chase or to down a survivor. You can vault over pallets and over windows quicker, so you can get a quick injury on someone, but outside of that it's not great. Legion is also heavily hindered by larger maps because it's going to be very difficult to chain hit multiple survivors during your frenzy, because it's very easy for them to spread out across the map. Legion is also slightly add-on dependent because they just need a couple of things to like increase their Feral Frenzy movement speed or increase how long it takes for survivors to mend themselves. But overall, Legion is a pretty decent pick. Next up we have the Cannibal, Leatherface. Now, he does have a very good chase as he's able to instantly down survivors with his chainsaw sweep, and he can down multiple survivors doing the same chainsaw sweep. However, outside of this, he's not very good. He doesn't have any mobility. He doesn't have great add-ons. He does need to use 2 add-ons, like the Chili add-on or the Beast Marks, to give him that extra speed whilst chainsawing. And if it's a map with lots of pallets or windows, you're not going to do very well because it's quite difficult to actually charge up the chainsaw in time in order to get the survivors. But yeah, overall, he's a good killer to choose if you're just starting out the game. Also, if you hook someone in an end game, then they're dead. You just stand in front of them and no one can do anything about it. And to finish off C tier, we have the Trickster. Now, the Trickster can down survivors very quickly, especially if they are in the open, as he can just pelt them with his knives very easily. And once you hit 8 of these knives, you're able to activate your main event, which allows you to throw an infinite amount of knives for the duration of it. He is also the only ranged killer to move at 4.6 meters a second, which is the speed of an average killer. However, he is an incredibly map-dependent killer. If it's a map with a lot of high walls or a lot of trees, you are not able to use your knives in Chase at all. However, if you get a map with a lot of low-lying obstacles instead, you're going to do really well. So Trickster's kind of that one killer that it's just all dependent on what map you get, is just dependent on how well you're going to do in that match. And for what it's worth, he's not really that add-on dependent, so I think he deserves to be at the top of C tier. Let's get into the B tier, where some of these killers made slight tweaks to make them really shine, but overall they're all fairly good. First up, we have the Death Slinger, who has very good anti-loop power. He's able to shoot survivors and then reel them towards him. And he basically hit this shot through any small crack or crevice, so he's not incredibly map dependent. The only problems he has are just like pallet heavy maps. The only drawbacks he really has is that he's slightly slower than the average killer. He doesn't have any mobility either, and he has some of the worst add-ons that I've seen on any killer. His best one's usually his reload add-on, but outside of that he doesn't have that great add-ons, so he's not really add-on dependent, so that's something. Next up we have the Doctor, who is able to shock survivors for a short period of time, preventing them from using pallets and windows, which makes it a pretty good anti-loop power. He also has very good tracking, as he can shock every survivor in his terror radius, causing them to scream and their madness tier to go up. Every time you shock a survivor, their madness goes up, and when they get to tier 3, they have to snap out of being insane, because they won't be able to do generators or use their items and whatnot. So he's got pretty decent slowdown as well. He's not incredibly map dependent or dependent on his good add-ons. However, he does have some very good add-ons to use. I would say if you do play Doctor, use some of his add-ons just to get like the extra bonuses, like getting a weirder skill checks and making illusionary doctors. So Doctor is just a pretty decent jack-of-all-trades kind of killer that can be played incredibly effectively. Next up we have the Twins, who is able to control a little gremlin and can pounce on survivors' backs, causing them to be injured, and they can't be healed or do anything for as long as Victor, the gremlin, is on their back for. You can also split up your pressure incredibly effectively, and you can down multiple survivors in succession if you play well and if they are quite grouped up together. And all in all, Twins isn't really that map dependent. There's just two really bad things about them. One is they have really bad add-ons. The best one is possibly a grey one that just increases your charge up time, or like a very rare one that increases Victor's movement speed. And they're just incredibly buggy and clunky. Like if you manage to pounce yourself on top of a pallet, or drop pallet even, Victor will just die. You'll be locked in place for like 3 seconds and Victor will die. So yeah, it's just a couple of things. Like Twins just needs a couple of quality of life changes. They could easily be A tier. The next killer I want to talk about is the Nemesis. Now Nemesis has a very good anti-loop power, as he's able to hit survivors with a tentacle. This will infect them and cause them to maybe want to go and get a vaccine, which gives you a little bit of slowdown, but they can live without it. Now every time you hit a survivor with your tentacle, it levels up, so you're able to break pallets at level 2, and you get increased range at level 3, which can feel incredibly oppressive once, like, if you get that tier 3 incredibly quickly. Nemesis can also shred through pallets incredibly quickly once he reaches tier 2. Like, you can break a pallet, like, the frame it's getting dropped, which can feel incredibly oppressive for the survivors. He does also have some decent map pressure with his zombies, as they wander the map and will go and pester survivors off generators, or just stop them from healing and stuff like that. His main drawback is just the add-on choices he has. He does not have anything to use. Marvin's Blood is an add-on he kind of has to use in order to keep up with the match, but everything else is just increases the zombie speed. It doesn't really affect his tentacle power. He does not have a good add-on choice, so he's not incredibly dependent on them, but yeah. Next up we have the Knight, who is able to summon guards and put them through patrol paths going across the map, giving him pretty good map pressure, as he can defend generators, which are the main areas of importance. He also has some pretty good anti-loop, as you can put a guard on one side of the loop, and if you go around the other side of the loop, you've basically got a free injury on the survivor. The only thing the survivor can really do is leave the loop, which makes him a very good zoning killer. You can also split up pressure incredibly well, as you can get a guard to chase one survivor and you can chase another survivor. His only drawbacks again are his add-ons. He doesn't have amazing ones, but he needs to use the Map of the Realm add-on to get an extra detection radius for his guards and their extra speed, I believe. But yeah, overall, he's a pretty good killer that unfortunately has some very bad add-ons. The next killer I want to talk about is the Wraith, who has a very good stealth power. He's able to go invisible and hide his terror radius. Whilst invisible, he is also much quicker, allowing him to get around maps incredibly effectively. He is also able to do well in chase, as when you uncloak from invisibility, you get a small speed boost, so if you time this with your lunge, you get an incredibly long lunge. He also has a pretty good variety of add-ons to choose from, like one of them makes his bell, which he uses to go invisible, become silent, so you're able to sneak up on survivors a lot easier. The only drawback he has is his slight map dependence, where if it's a pretty palette-heavy map, or map with lots of windows, you're not going to do as well as you would in other maps. Now we have quite possibly the most controversial killer ever added to Dead by Daylight, and that is the Skull Merchant, who has had numerous changes to her kit. Now she's just a bit of a mess, but somehow got the highest kill rate this month, or last month even, so, you know, that's got to count for something. She places down drones which scan survivors, and they put claw traps on survivors. If they get tagged 3 times, they become injured and they cannot be healed for a certain amount of time. The Skull Merchant also has her speed increased for every survivor that has a claw trap on them. It is also worth noting that every time Skull Merchant puts down one of her drones, she becomes undetectable for like 8 seconds, so, you know, it's an okay stealth mechanic, I guess. And having survivors run around and try disable your drones is pretty decent slowed down on top of everything else she has, so overall she's a pretty decent killer who isn't that dependent on add-ons either. Next up is the Dredge, who does have some pretty good mobility as he can teleport to lockers, although the only downside to this part is it's kind of map dependent because sometimes lockers just don't spawn on or like near points of interest. But other than that, he has very good anti-loot power as he can drop a remnant and just teleport back to it whenever he likes to. He also has a passive ability called Nightfall, which every time you injure and down and hook survivors, it charges up. Once it's fully charged up, your locker teleports become quicker, so you're allowed to get across the map a lot faster than you would otherwise. And also survivors are pretty disorientated, as a lot of their screen is just engulfed by a black fog, and also you become undetectable, although the Dredge is really loud, so the stealth isn't as good as you'd think it is, but it's still, you know, usable. He's kind of add-on dependent. He needs a couple of things to like help build up his Nightfall quicker and get out of the lockers quickly, but overall he doesn't have any outstanding add-ons. Now it's time to talk about one of my least favourite killers, the Hag. Now the Hag places traps down. She's not like Trapper where you have to go pick them up. It's just a little mud symbol on the floor, and when a survivor triggers this trap, she can then teleport to the trap. This does make her pretty good for camping, as you can just lock down an area a hooked survivor is in, which means you can just basically camp from like 40 meters away. But if you don't want to play like an asshole, you're going to have to play her pretty effectively in order to get results, because she does require quite a bit of brain power to like set down areas and try to chase survivors in the specific areas so she can be incredibly effective. You do also have to be smart with the trap placements as well, because survivors can just wipe them away. It used to be they could only get rid of them with a torch, but now you can do it base kit. She is a lot weaker, I'd say, than she was before. She is also slightly add-on dependent, I'd say, just like maybe have an add-on that increases the range of your teleport or the trap range, but she does have some very good add-ons that just allow you to teleport to traps whenever you want. She's not very map dependent either, which is kind of surprising because you have to play her kind of like Trapper. She is also only a 4.2 meters a second, which is, as we've said, slightly slower than the average killer, so if she was 4.6 and you still had to use a torch to get rid of the traps, I'd say that she could actually be A tier, because she's a very strong killer in the right hands. Now to finish off the B tier, we have the Demogorgon. Now the Demogorgon can place portals around the map, which is pretty good traversal, as you can place a portal in an important area and you can teleport to that as long as the survivor doesn't destroy it. He also has a pretty good chase power, as he can charge up a shred attack and that lunges him forward, and that can kind of catch survivors before they get to windows or pallets and such. And you can also use this shred attack off of small cliffs or higher up areas on specific maps, because sometimes it doesn't work. But yeah, you can just fire yourself off the cliff and you get a good amount of distance. He also has a pretty good set of add-ons as well. Overall, he's just a basic and good killer. Now we're getting into the A tier, where these are all a very good choice of killers. They're a good spot, balance-wise, but they may need a little bit of practice to bring out their full potential. And now we're going to start this tier off with Pinhead. Now Pinhead has some good slowdown, as survivors have to go and find your box in order to prevent a chain hunt from happening. If a chain hunt does occur, they will all be pestered by small chains that will just keep pricking into them and slowing them down and stopping them from really doing anything. Pinhead can also summon a chain himself, which pins 3 chains against the afflicted survivor, slowing them down. Now, if a survivor does start solving the puzzle box, you will have the option to teleport to them, which is good because you just get an option to be constantly in chase with survivors. He does also have some good add-ons, like the iridescent puzzle box, which hides the aura of it, and he's not overly dependent on add-ons either, so you can mix and match with different builds. His map dependency is really weird though, because larger maps are bad for him because he does not have any mobility apart from teleporting to survivors that solve the box. However, larger maps are also better for him because survivors have to go out looking for the box. So, in a way, he isn't super map dependent, but he is at the same time. It's weird. But overall, he's got everything a good killer needs: good slowdown, good chase. What more could you want, really? Now I want to talk about the newest killer, the Unknown. Now, I can't really say much about him because I haven't played him, because I'm a console scrub and I can't get on the PTB, but from what I've seen, he seems pretty damn good. So for his primary power, he shoots a ball out of his chest, and that he can hit multiple survivors, and it gives them the weakened status effect, which slows them down for a little bit. But if you hit a weakened survivor with this power, you can then injure them, and keep in mind you can injure multiple survivors with this power, which I think is probably why he's so good. To cleanse himself of the weakened status effect, all survivors have to do is just look at you, so you don't get a lot of slowdown in that regard. You do get a slight amount of slowdown in his second part of his power, where you just uncontrollably drop illusions of yourself. You can then teleport to these illusions whenever you want, and it's instant, by the way. It's not like Demogorgon where you have to do this animation. No, you're just there. So yeah, his map traversal is incredibly good. The only bad thing about it is you just can't control when it happens. Survivors can also have the option of dispelling these things. Hallucinations, yeah, that's it. I'm not really sure if he has any good add-ons or if he's reliant on them. He doesn't seem very reliant on add-ons, and it does look like he's got some pretty decent ones. And he doesn't look very map dependent either, because he can just, shoot over pallets and stuff. So I don't know, I think he's going to be a strong killer when he comes out. Next up we have the Xenomorph. Now the Xenomorph can crawl through tunnels that are located around the map. So they have some pretty good traversal. Whilst they're crawling through tunnels, you can see survivor footprints above you, so that's also pretty decent tracking as well. The Xenomorph also eventually goes into runner mode, which gives them a smaller terror radius, and also allows you to use your tail attack, which is basically a nemesis tentacle, but you can hit over stuff and it just injures the survivors straight up. Survivors are equipped with flame turrets, however, and getting hit by these turrets will snap you out of this power. Xeno also has some pretty good add-ons that you can use, and she doesn't really need them either, which, is just a little bonus, gives you a bit of variety. And they're not really map dependent either, because you can just hit over pallets and windows and such. It's really difficult to loop a good Xenomorph. This might be a little bit of a controversial pick, but I'm going to put in the Singularity. Now, the Singularity is one of those killers that you really have to understand how to use the killer in order to do incredibly well, but if you understand how to use him, you know how incredibly good he is. He's got really good tracking because he's able to put biopods around the map, which you can then look into, like cameras basically. He's got a good slowdown as well because survivors have to go out of their way to get EMPs so they can disable the biopods and also get rid of the slipstream effect that's on them, which the biopods can shoot out. If you fire one of these biopods at a slipstream survivor, you will get the overclock status effect, which makes you run a little bit quicker, you can vault and break pallets quickly, and you can also break pallets if you're stunned, so you can just slowly walk through them. Singularity is also really good at destroying uncoordinated teams, because if a team doesn't know when to, help the teammate out with an EMP or just disable certain biopods, you're gonna stomp all over them. It's really easy playing against an uncoordinated team as Singularity. Add-on wise, I would say slightly dependent on some of the lower tier ones, like having just an extra biopod or two, but he does have some very good add-ons, like one where all survivors start Slipstream. That is very good. But yeah, I wouldn't say he's very map dependent either, and overall he's just a really great killer to learn. Next up we're going to be talking about the Hillbilly. Now the Hillbilly does have a very simple concept for a power. You charge up your chainsaw, you go really quick, and then you instantly down any survivor you run into. The reason why I've put him so high in this tier is just because of the skill ceiling. You can do so much with Billy, and if you learn how to master him, you're going to be tearing through teams left and right. Now that he has an overdrive ability instead of the overheat, so now when you use your chainsaw, you go even faster, and it charges up faster. It's just... it's really nice having Hillbilly in this tier, is what I'm trying to say. Yeah, but overall, he's got really good traversal, he does have some good add-ons, he's not dependent on any of them. It's a lot easier to traverse the maps than it used to be, so he's not as map dependent, but I will say he is still relatively map dependent. But overall, the Hillbilly is just a really fast killer that can insta-down survivors. It's pretty good. Next up, we have the Onryo. Now, the Onryo can teleport to tallies that are around the map. They do tend to spawn next to generators, so she's basically got a better Freddy teleport. And the cool thing about this ability, it's only the tallies themselves that go on cooldown. Your power is never on cooldown. Also, every time you teleport, survivors around the television get a stack of Condemned. Now, if they get 7 stacks of Condemned, you can kill them. To get rid of these stacks, survivors will have to go and take VHS tapes out of the tallies and put them into other tallies. So it's a pretty good slowdown as well. You do have a secondary power that is pretty similar to the Wraiths, where you hide your terror radius, you become less visible, but you cannot be stunned by pallets either, so it can be helpful to use in chase. And add-on wise, she does have a couple of decent ones, but she's not overly dependent on them. And she may be slightly map dependent if it's quite pallet heavy, but overall, she's a pretty solid killer. Next up, we have the Plague. Now, the Plague can just vomit on anything like generators, windows, and survivors. Survivors interacting with infected objects will get sick. When survivors are fully sick, they will become injured. So if it's a team that likes to stay healthy, they will be running around the map trying to cleanse themselves of this infection, so it is a very good slowdown. You will also be rewarded for when survivors cleanse, as you'll be able to use your Corrupt Purge when you go to one of these fountains, which is just like the vomit, but you injure survivors instead of infecting them, which is possibly the best anti-loop or chase power in the entire game. Some teams may not cleanse at the fountains to give you the Corrupt Purge, however, this means they'll just be injured the entire match, which makes chases a lot easier than what they would be. Now, Plague does also have a very good set of add-ons. It doesn't really need them either, but it's like Doctor, you may as well use them because they're there. I would say her only drawback are the fountains themselves, because it's dependent on what map it is and where they spawn. They could spawn quite far out of the map, so there's not really much point of you going there. So some teams will just specifically use these fountains that you're not going to want to go to. Next up, I want to talk about the Artist. Now, the Artist possibly has the best map presence of any killer, as she's able to summon crows that can go across the entire map. If they come into contact with survivors, they will be swarmed by smaller crows, and if you're able to hit these survivors again, they will become injured. She does also have some pretty decent anti-loop, as survivors coming into contact with crows at short range just become injured, so you can just plonk a crow down at a pallet or a window and kind of lock the loop down really effectively. The only drawback she really has are her add-ons. They're pretty god-awful, and her counterplay is quite simple. All survivors really have to do is just run in a straight line away from you, and you can't really use your power effectively. She does tend to do well on most maps. The only drawback she has map-wise are 2 story maps, but other than that, she is just a really solid killer. Next up, we have the Huntress. Now, the Huntress is a very simple power. You just throw a hatchet, and if it hits a survivor, they become injured. She does have a pretty good map presence, so she can down survivors from really far away across the map, which is a good chase because, well, you can down survivors from distance, so, stop them from going through windows and such. She has some pretty good add-ons that allow her to carry more hatchets or increase the speed of the hatchet being thrown. She is actually getting buffed next update, so she can hold up to 2 extra hatches. So this makes her less add-on dependent than she already is. Her only drawback is her map dependency. If it's a map with a lot of high walls or an indoor map, she's not going to do very well. Next we have the Oni. Now the Oni has to injure a survivor in order to collect blood orbs to charge up his power. When his power does become fully charged and you activate it, you basically become a 60 mph semi-truck running at survivors. You become incredibly fast, you can insta-down survivors incredibly quickly, and multiple if they are clumped up together. And unlike Hillbilly, you don't bump into objects, you kind of just run into them so you can slide across and your power won't get cancelled unless you pick up a survivor. The only drawbacks he really has are he only has a handful of good add-ons and he is slightly map dependent. He doesn't do as well on palette heavy maps, but overall he's a very good killer. Now at the top of A tier I put the mastermind Albert Wesker. Now I may be a little bit biased because I do main Wesker, however he does have a very good chase as he's able to dash at survivors and cut them off before they get to pallets and windows. It's good slowdown as he can infect survivors with the Ouroboros. Survivors are going to have to go around the map and spray themselves, otherwise they will become slower and you can insta-down them with your power. He does also have decent mobility as you can choose your dashes to get around the map a little bit quicker. He does have some very good add-ons, he doesn't need them either, but you know, these add-ons range from survivors starting the match infected, or you can just increase the range of one of your dashes. He's not incredibly map dependent either, like on his worst maps you can still quite easily do well with him. But the reason why I've put him at the top of A tier is because of how consistent he is. He has a good chase, he's got slowdown when you use your power. Overall, he's just a very good killer. Now let's get into the A+ tier. Now these killers are all very good, and they may even need some slight nerfs just to bring their power down a notch. And the first killer I want to talk about is the good guy, Chucky. Now the only bad thing about Chucky is that he has footprints constantly following him to help survivors track him during chase. However, everything else about him is great. He has a great power where he's able to go undetectable and spawn these footprints around survivors. You lose the footprints in power as well, as I'd mentioned. Whilst you're in the power, you can vault under pallets and vault over windows quickly, and you're also able to perform a dash attack that injures any survivor that gets in the way. He does also have some very good add-ons to help with his strength, and he doesn't really need to use any of them either, and due to him being able to vault under pallets and over windows, he doesn't really have to try in loops, so it doesn't really make him map dependent either. Next up we have the Executioner, Pyramid Head. Now Pyramid Head is able to fire a wave attack at survivors, injuring any that get in the way of it. This attack can hit survivors when they are vaulting pallets and windows, so it gives them a pretty good anti-loop tool. You're also able to hit through walls, so if you can predict survivor movements, then you're going to be a pretty dangerous Pyramid Head. You also have a secondary power where when you charge up your wave attack, you drag a trail through the ground, making a barbed wire everywhere. If a survivor walks into this, they become tormented. Tormented survivors can be put into cages rather than hooks, disabling hook-related perks like Decisive Strike, and they don't get the endurance when they get saved as well, which makes them very good for tunneling. And if a tormented survivor is on death hook, you can kill them once they're downed. The only bad part about Pyramid Head, and maybe the only reason why he isn't S tier, is that he has the worst add-ons on any killer. He has 3 usable add-ons, which increases range of his wave attack, but that's it. He doesn't have anything else worth running. Now to finish up this tier we have the Spirit. Now the Spirit is able to turn invisible and move really quickly. The only downside is you can't see survivors. You can however see their scratch marks and pools of blood, and you can still hear them as well. So all you have to really do is injure a survivor first and then chase them down in your invisibility phase power to make sure that survivor doesn't make any distance for an easy down. Judging that it can be very easy to down survivors, it doesn't really make her map dependent because she can play around pallets incredibly effectively. She does also have very good add-ons as well that you can mix and match because she doesn't really need them, but using them can make her feel incredibly oppressive. And now finally we have the S tier. Now these are the best killers in the game by far, and then they probably need some nerfs just to bring them down a notch. Now first of all we have the Blight. Now the Blight is able to perform multiple rushes and recharge each rush by running into a wall. After the first rush he can then attack a survivor. You can use these rushes to get anywhere incredibly quickly, so he has very good mobility all across the map. He's very unpredictable in chase as well, as he can very easily just bounce around the tile and very easily confuse the survivors. He has very good add-ons as well. They're not as good as they used to be, but some have actually been improved, so he is a bit of a menace if you use any of these good add-ons. He doesn't really need them, though, to, use him. He is slightly map dependent, because trying to get through doorways and stuff on indoor maps can be a bit of a pain in the ass. But other than that, he is a very, very good killer that probably could take a nerf or two. And finally, we have the Nurse. I knew it, you knew it, your dog knows it. Nurse is easily the strongest killer in the entire game. She can teleport through walls and obstacles and over pallets and through windows. So she's possibly the best chaser in... No, not possibly. She is the best chaser in the entire game. These teleports can be charged up so she can go incredibly fast, so she has a pretty good mobility. She can easily pinball between different survivors. If there's like multiple grouped up, she can down one, quickly down another, and quickly down another. And she could basically finish games within like less than 5 minutes. She has some good add-ons, she doesn't need any of them. But overall, she is easily the best killer in the entire game. And behavior, please. I know you nerfed her once before. Unfortunately, it was not enough. But yeah. That just about sums it up. This was my Dead by Daylight killer tier list. It went on for too fecking long, quite frankly. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, watch it all the way through. Cheers for that. This took me a good 20 odd hours to make, but what do you do? Consider liking, subscribing. I may do more videos like this, like a bit longer projects. Also, do want to mention the guy that I stole the gameplay recordings off of. His quality isn't that bad on his YouTube videos. It's just me being a dumbass and not knowing how to download them properly. But yeah, thanks as always for watching. Next video is going to be tomorrow. We're going to be checking out the new killer. And yeah, hope you enjoyed that. And I'll hopefully see you there. Toodles.